Melbourne area back in 1902. I was just 4 years old when I arrived there. And my family were there decades before that. They were fishermen along the St. Johns River. When my father died in 1921, I became the first Standard Oil agent in the state, why, even in the United States. I was just 23 years of age at that time, and I had been working for my father for over 10 years. Now, the women's right to vote had just come in 1920. Can you imagine? I was already a successful businesswoman by that time. I bet you're wondering what children did in that time and growing up. Well, the thing that I remember the most was going down on the mail boat from Oak Alley on up to Melbourne, to Cocoa. And we'd have to get there very early in the morning, and I was always afraid I was going to miss that boat. So I wiggled all night long, and by the time I got to sleep, it was already time to get up and get dressed and get down to that pier. I would be the first one down there. I could see the sun coming up. It was so clear. You could look right down in that river, and it was crystal clear. You could see fish of all kinds swimming around, some big and small, and I look up, and sometimes there were fish jumping right out of the water. It wasn't very long before the mailman came down with the rest of the folk, and the boat would be running, and we'd take off from Merritt Island. Oh, the first stop was a little settlement called Tropic, and everybody come running down to the dock when we got there, and they'd bring us orange juice and cookies. And mostly we would go and help hand out the mail and take grocery lists that the postman would, so he could deliver their groceries on the way back. The next stop we'd stop at would be called, it was the Osteen Dock. And there they do the same thing, except they would bring down food and coffee for the old folk, and we'd get off and play with the pets that the children had brought there. And then off we would go again to our next stop. Our next stop was called Georgiana. There was one lady there that could make the most delicious cookies in the world, and she'd bring it for everybody in the whole boat. And then we'd get back on we'd go to the last stop before we get over to Cocoa. And that last stop was called Footman. Same thing had happened there. Everybody come down, happy to see us, except there, the children would bring us some interesting creatures. Maybe they'd caught a possum, or a dead bird had fallen down, and they got the feathers and showed how it was, or maybe a snake, or even a turtle. Sometimes they might even bring down an alligator hide. Then off we would go into Cocoa. Everybody got off the boat there and went shopping and did all the chores there. And then we'd have lunch. There was a little place there, like a tea room sort of, and they had ham sandwiches on buns. I can taste it to this very day. It was the most delicious ham sandwich. I'd have it with a Coke. Now, I had been up pretty early, so I'd sneak down to the boat and take a little nap, because we wouldn't be leaving until the 5 o'clock train came in and they throw the mail out. And then we'd all get back on that boat and go on down to the next stop. Now, this is where there was a great mystery. At the next stop, they wouldn't let the ladies off, and they wouldn't let the children. Men would get off and go down, and they had a kind of a funny look on their face. They'd go down that dock and come back with a smile. I was a grown lady before I ever found out what it was. You know, at the end of that dock, in one of the buildings, was a still maker, and they bought themselves something, moonshine. That's what they'd gotten. But it was years and years before I found out this. Now, there was one other thing that was interesting. We didn't have any churches there. It was too small. And so we were Catholics, and there were a few Catholics in that area, and they would come down to my mom's house for Mass. She had several rooms, and in one parlor was where we would pull out the great big Queen Anne table and put across it damask cloth, and then that would make the altar, and we'd put our candles on there, and the host, and then in a corner, because there were folding doors there, the priest would say the confessions. At first, we had this handsome father. His name was Father Gabriel. He was tall, curly-headed, wide shoulders. All the children loved him. But then one day, they brought another priest in from Fort Pierce. His name was Father Gabriel, and he was short, from Switzerland, bald-headed. He didn't at all look like Father Curly. And we children had our hearts broken in. We got cold shoulder to him. But he was a smart man. Great diplomat, they called him. Because every time he'd come down in the morning on the train, going back at night, have Mass in that morning, go back the next day, he'd always make a visit up to what they call the package store. And there he'd buy something from the Protestant people that lived there. And he'd talk to them, and they began to like him very much. They were waiting for him to come. Now, the next smart thing he did was to go up to the drugstore. I'll bet you know what he bought and brought back to us. Candy, of course. And it wasn't long before we loved him just as much as we had Father Curly. Now, Father Gabriel turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful priest. He became the head of, they named the Knights of Columbus after him. And he was one of the best diplomats because he made the Catholics and the Protestants friends. And they liked each other, and they talked to each other a lot. You know, it wasn't long before, remember I told you I became in my father's business? Well, they wouldn't just let me into my father's business. You see, I had to go up to Louisville, Kentucky, and I had to go and ask for my father's agency in front of the board of directors. And I went and asked him if I could have my father's position as agent. They were a little shocked because this was in 1921. As I told you, the ladies didn't get votes in the country until 1920. And they invited me to wait outside where they made their decision. They argued and argued. I listened at the keyhole to be sure what was going on. They were hollering and making such noise, arguing with one another. And then I heard a big fist come down on a table. And I heard a man say, "Let the little girl try. She won't last a year." Well, he was right. I lasted 62, not just a year. Now that I'm going to retire, I'd like to read a letter that I got. See, I was the oldest person that ever worked on that agency. And the letter reads like this. August 29th, 1983. Dear Miss Rossetter, congratulations on your retirement. Yours has been a career marked by dedication and achievement. You should take great pride in your many years of accomplishments. Nancy joins me and wishing you continued happiness and enjoyment in the years ahead. Sincerely, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States. Isn't that something? Since women didn't have the right to vote until 19 when? That's right. I became legally able to vote in a presidential election just a few months before I became a successful businesswoman. You know, at the age of 82, I believe I had the record of the longest term in this Chevron family. I remember how surprised the agents were that I lasted that long, that I even got in there. But the person who was even more surprised was my mother, for she was a Southern magnolia, and she didn't believe that a woman could be a business person and still be a lady. But I was.